It's time for the real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? It's the real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully you've had a nice week. It is Thursday. Yesterday was Get Over the Hump Day. Trying to help Mike Whitson get over that hump of beating Northwestern, and he couldn't do it. Indiana loses to Northwestern last night for the fifth time in a row, 5 times in the last 4 years. And at the end of the first half, I felt pretty good about Indiana and their chances to win. They finished the half on an 18-2 run. The defense was spectacular. They don't allow a field goal for almost 10 minutes. Northwestern only scored 25 points in that first half. And you're going into halftime like, hey, they start making some shots. This should be fine because the defensive intensity, the effort that we've been dying to see from Indiana all year was there in the first half. And then the second half happened. And they gave up 54 points, just a 3-point barrage from Northwestern, who ended up shooting, 48% from 3 last night. It felt like every single one of them came in the second half. And it was just frustrating because they went from a team, Indiana, that looked like a good basketball team to whatever that was in the second half. Mike Whitson was asked after the game about the defensive performance, giving up 54 points in the second half. Here's what Mike Whitson had to say.
Well, again, I think at the timeout it was 54-52, and then they went on a deep run. We went to the bench and subbed a couple guys, and we just didn't answer the bell coming back out of that timeout, and they did. And we just didn't the same things that they ran the second. We didn't guard well the second half, and they made us pay for it, especially from the 3-point area. They made 3-point shots all over the floor. We never responded.
They never responded. Mike Whitson right there talking about Indiana and that horrific second half against Northwestern last night. Went into halftime up by 6 and came out of halftime and into the game losing by 9. They lost 79-70. What happened? What changed? Why did they all of a sudden start to suck last night? It's a great question. Well, first and foremost, they turned the basketball over way too much. I mean, you can't turn the ball over 17 times and expect to win. They didn't run shooters off the 3-point line. Northwestern was 13 of 27 from 3. Almost half of their shots came from behind the 3-point line. The fact that they were able to get up 27 threes is incredible. They took 58 shots total. That's almost half of their shots were threes. Like, at some point, you would think that Indiana would just run them off the 3-point line, and they never did. I sure hope that Lou Anarumo, the Colts' new defensive coordinator, makes more adjustments than Mike Whitson did last night. I've got an interview coming up at 10:20 with Reid Maus of Chatterbox Sports in Cincinnati. He's a Bengals fan. He's watched Lou Anarumo every Sunday for the last 6 years, and then Zach Hicks at 11 o'clock as well to further discuss Lou Anarumo. But Mike Whitson and his inability to adjust on the fly last night in the second half is a large part of why they lost. When your opponent scores 54 points in a half, you should lose every time. When your opponent shoots 48% from 3, you should lose every time. Northwestern is better than Indiana, who, man, when I started working here, never thought I would say that. Never thought I would say that. Northwestern's better than Indiana because over the last 4 years, they have been better than Indiana at everything that's important in college basketball now. For the first time since 1915, 110 years ago, Indiana has lost 5 straight games to Northwestern. Here's some fun facts for you. Here are some things that happened in 1915. Once again, 110 years ago. I mean, it's just, oh my gosh. The Vancouver Millionaires, that's not a team anymore, swept the Ottawa Senators 3-0 to win the 1915 Stanley Cup Finals. World War I was going on in 1915. I mean, this is incredible. Babe Ruth hit his first home run in 1915. Ralph DePalma won the Indy 500 that year. And the Red Sox beat the Phillies in the World Series. It's 110 years ago. Okay? During Mike Woodson's time at Indiana, there have been 2 issues that have led to Indiana losing to Northwestern 5 times in a row. The first time since 1915. Oh my gosh. There's been two major issues with these Mike Woodson coach teams. First and foremost, the guard play has not been good enough. Mike Woodson has done an excellent job of bringing front court talent down to Bloomington. He has. There's been a lot of talent and production from the front court. Trace Jackson Davis, right, was there Mike Woodson's first 2 years. He's playing in the NBA now. Very talented player. He was Indiana's best player when he was there. Okay, he led Indiana to a 4 seed. That was the highest that they'd been seeded in a decade. In 2023, when they were named a 4 seed, he was an All-American that year. In the 2021 to 2022 season, the first year that Mike Woodson was there, Trace Jackson Davis led the charge to put Indiana in the NCAA tournament. That broke a 6-year drought. Last year, Trace Jackson Davis leaves, goes to play for the Warriors. They bring in Khalil Ware, who ended up being the 15th overall pick, who's now playing for the Miami Heat and playing really well, might I add. Malik Renew, guy who's been the power forward these last 2 years. He was a 15-point-a-game scorer last year. They brought in Mackenzie Mbako, the 10th-ranked player in the country. And as a freshman, he was co-freshman of the year in the Big Ten. The front court depth and talent that Mike Woodson has had has been excellent. This year, Malik Renew's back. He was bad last night, but he hadn't played in 6 games. His touch was clearly off around the basket. Finished 0 of 6 from the floor with 2 points that he scored off of free throws. Mike Woodson got Omar Ballo, the number 1 ranked player in the transfer portal, to come from Arizona to play for him. He's a good player. He leads the Big Ten in rebounding at just over 10 a game. That's 9th in the country. His 14.5 points per game now leads the Hoosiers on a per-night basis. Mackenzie Mbako was supposed to be awesome this year. He's been up and down. He was up last night, 20 points on 8 of 14 shooting. Once again, the front court, the forwards, the centers in the 4 years that Mike Woodson has been the head coach of the Indiana Hoosiers has been good. It has been. It has been more than good enough to win some games. Their front court tends to be better than a lot of the teams that they've been playing. The issue is the guard play. The guards that have come through Indiana under Mike Woodson haven't been good enough. Remember Xavier Johnson transferred in from Pitt? He was the pride and joy of Mike Woodson for the first 3 years that he was here. He wasn't a bad player, but he wasn't a difference maker. He was just another power forward guard who could kind of shoot, dribble, and kind of pass. Okay, whenever he would check in to games, no one ever said, oh, Xavier Johnson's in the game. Watch out. Watch out. Whereas last night, Ty Berry from Northwestern, every time he came in, I was like, gosh, dang it. They're about to make everything because this Ty Berry kid is on the floor. During Xavier Johnson's 3 years at Indiana, he averaged 10.5 points on 41% shooting. That's inefficient. But to be fair to him, he did shoot 38% from 3. So that's something. He averaged 4 assists to 2.5 turnovers. That is not a good ratio at all. Once again, he was just another guard in the Big Ten. Okay? Very average, right? And average guard play doesn't win you games against good teams. Trey Galloway, or Gallo, as Mike Woodson likes to call him. He's been here for every single year of the Mike Woodson experience. He hasn't gotten any better. He's still a streaky 3-point shooter. He's at 36% this year, but it's an inconsistent 36%. It feels like he either makes 2 threes or he misses all of them. In his 5 years of college basketball, he's averaged double digits once. Turns the ball over way too much. 2.1 turnovers a game from your point guard isn't good. In fact, that's the highest mark of Trey Galloway's career. And then you continue to look through the rest of the guards that Mike Woodson has brought in. Parker Stewart, you remember him? He was here 1 year, then transferred because he wasn't good enough to play in the Big Ten. Okay, last year it was C.J. Gunn and Trey Galloway and Gabe Cupps and Xavier Johnson. It's just not a very good lineup. They were average at best when you compare them to the rest of the guards in the Big Ten. And that's why Indiana didn't make the tournament. The talent in the front court has been there. The issue has been the guards. There was 1 year where Mike Woodson was able to bring in an elite NBA level guard, and that was Jalen Hood-Schifino. Whether you like him or not, he was the best guard talent that Mike Woodson has brought in. And he wasn't even some elite talent. Like he was drafted like 17th overall. He was just a good guard who could get to the rim if he needed to, and he could kind of shoot it. He averaged 13.5 points on 42% shooting and 33% from three. He was the best guard Mike Woodson has had. And the 1 year that they had him, what happened? They were a 4 seed in the tournament, the highest seed that they had been since 2013 when they were a 5 seed. No, I take that back. They were a 1 seed that year. Apologies. Okay, the lack of good guard play is why these Indiana teams have struggled. And it's why they lost last night. In fact, it's why they've lost to Northwestern 5 times in a row. Last year, Indiana lost to Northwestern 76-72. Ryan Langborn had 26 points for Northwestern, guard, 4-7 from three in that game. In the 2022 to 2023 season, Indiana lost 84-83. Boo Buie, elite guard, had 26 points, 10 of 18 from the field. Later that same season, they lost to Northwestern 64-62. Boo Buie, 21 points on 7 of 13 shooting. And then in Mike Woodson's first season in Bloomington, they lost to Northwestern 59-57. Boo Buie had 18 points. Every time Indiana has played Northwestern, Northwestern has won the game because their guards have been better than Indiana's. And last night, it was the exact same story. Northwestern had the best guards on the floor. Barnheiser went for 23. Ty Berry off the bench went for 23, shot 7 of 10 from downtown. Both of them outplayed every guard that stepped on the floor for IU last night. Mike Woodson has not done a good enough job of bringing in elite guards who can impact the game. Okay? Just look at Purdue. Why are they winning games this year? Because they have Braden Smith, arguably the best point guard in the country. Okay? Braden Smith's freshman year, when he was not amongst the best guards in the country, and he was just figuring it out. What happened? He turned the ball over a whole bunch, and they got upset by Fairleigh Dickinson in the first round as the number 1 overall seed. It didn't matter that they had Zach Edey because they didn't have the guards to get him the ball. You have to have good guard play to win in college basketball. And Mike Woodson hasn't brought great guards in. The one time he did, they were a 4 seed, and Jalen Hood-Schifino wasn't even that great. He also hasn't done a good enough job of bringing in the shooting that you need to win. Mike Woodson has made the tournament twice. Okay, this is year 4. Look, a lot of season left. Maybe they turn it around and they sneak in. But I'm not convinced that that's going to happen. Okay, the first year that Mike Woodson made the tournament, his first year as head coach, that team shot 33% from three. That was 158th in the country. They snuck into the NCAA tournament. They were one of the last 4 in. They were a 12 seed, and they had to play in Dayton. They won that game, ended up getting beat by St. Mary's in the round of 64. The next year, the best team that Mike Woodson has had in that 2022 to 2023 season, that was his best shooting team. They shot 37% from three on the year. That was 48th in the country. Like, that is a solid place to be. If you're shooting 37% from three, you are a good offense. I mean, that tells me that you're creating open looks and you have the shooters who can make the shots. Speaking of shooters, say what you want about Miller Kopp and the videos and all that weird stuff, but bro could shoot it. He shot 44% from three that year on 4 attempts a game. You have to have shooting. It is not a coincidence that the best team that Mike Woodson has had featured not only his best shooter in Miller Kopp, his best shooting team as a whole, and Jalen Hood-Schifino, the best guard that he's had. It's pretty incredible what happens when you have a good point guard and some guys around him who can shoot the basketball. If Indiana had a shooter like Miller Kopp on this team, they would be so much better. They lack shooting once again last year with an NBA center in Khalil Ware. They only won 19 games. It's because they couldn't shoot the ball. They shot 32% from three as a team last year. That's awful. That was 234th in the country. This year, this is Mike Woodson's worst shooting team. They're only shooting 31% from three. That's 305th in the country. Okay? For reference, there are 352 college basketball teams at the Division I level. Only 47 of them shoot the ball worse than IU. And then, we already compared the guards from Northwestern and Indiana over the past couple of years, but this is another area where Northwestern has been better than IU. They shoot the ball better than Indiana does. In the 2021 to 2022 season, Northwestern shot 35% from three to IU's 33%. And in the 2022-2023 season, Northwestern shot 32% from three to IU's 37%. And guess what? IU was a 4 seed that year. Last year, Northwestern shot 39% from three to Indiana's 32%. And then this year, Northwestern's at 32% to Indiana's 31%. Those are the issues. They are plain as day. Indiana doesn't have elite guards coming through this program under Mike Woodson, and they don't have much shooting. The two things that you have to win in college basketball, Indiana does not, or they haven't had under Mike Woodson. Okay, the two best teams Mike Woodson had were the teams that shot the ball well and had good guard play. Yes, the guard play Mike Woodson's first year was better than it is now. Xavier Johnson would make the guard play on this team better. That's how bad the guard play has been this year. Miles Rice, the next Jesus, the guy who was just supposed to be the savior of this Indiana team, the guy who was supposed to come in and be the guy, is one-dimensional. He can finish at the rim. Fantastic. But he can't shoot. That is problematic. He can't shoot. He's shooting 29% from three this year. That's an issue. And geez, who would have thought this would happen given he shot 28% from three last year? The guard play and the shooting have to be better for Indiana if they want to win games going forward. And it doesn't matter who the coach is, whether it's Mike Woodson, whether it's me, whether it's you. If Indiana does not have good guard play, and if Indiana doesn't have guys that can shoot the basketball, it does not matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't. Oh, man. Indiana. 14-6, though. There's still time for them to get it rolling, I guess. We'll see. Oh, geez. Reid Maus of Chatterbox Sports in Cincinnati. He's set to join me coming up here in this next segment. Lou Anarumo, he did his introductory press conference today. He is the new defensive coordinator of the Indianapolis Colts. Very excited to see what all he brings to the table. I've got Reid Maus from Cincinnati, does sports talk there. He's got thoughts on Lou Anarumo, and we're going to talk a little bit of baseball too, because he's a big baseball guy. The Hall of Fame inductees came out yesterday, so a lot of stuff to get to. Reid Maus of Chatterbox Sports when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
The best takes. The real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully you've had a nice week. Thursday, one more day, and it's Friday, and then we get NFL football this weekend. A lot of basketball on Saturday as well, but football, it's always on the top of the mind here in Indianapolis. So this morning, I got up early, came in. Technology is wonderful. My friend Reid hosts a show for Chatterbox Sports in Cincinnati. He's on the air right now, but we pre-recorded an interview this morning. He had thoughts on Lou Anarumo, who did his introductory press conference today, was the defensive coordinator in Cincinnati for 6 years. So I hit up my buddy Reid, asked him if he'd be willing to come on and share his thoughts on the Bengals' former and Colts' current defensive coordinator. And here is that interview with the one and only Reid Mouse. Welcoming in now to the real Jonathan Smith Show, first-time guest, Reid Mouse of Chatterbox Sports in Cincinnati. Reid, what's going on, man?
Hey, well, glad to be on. I think we're matching right now. I think we both got like the tan sweatshirts on. I'm rocking Chatterbox. You're rocking the Jonathan Smith Show. So pumped to be on here and talking about Sweet Lou. Sweet Lou.
So you like him then? That's what I'm hearing. Everyone I've talked to in Cincinnati at least likes him, at least a little bit. Is that kind of where you're at? Yeah, no, I don't think any Bengals fan hated Lou Anarumo. And I think we're all glad that he's gone, but I think it was just because we needed a change because what was working wasn't working anymore. So, yeah, no one dislikes Lou Anarumo because he was such a big piece of that 2-year run of going to the Super Bowl and going to the AFC Championship. But no one hates Lou Anarumo. Well, maybe Joe does because of this past season, but no one hates Lou Anarumo. So, from my understanding, everything that I've read, a lot of the blame as to why the Bengals defense slid this last year is because they lost a lot of guys to free agency because when you pay Joe Burrow, you have to sacrifice some things. Is that an accurate depiction of what happened? Yes and no. I'm kind of a Bengal. Like this is what good teams do. You've got to let guys walk and everything like that. The only guy that was a huge loss from those good years was Jesse Bates, obviously going to Atlanta. He's one of the best, if not the best safety in the league. DJ Reader was a pretty sizable miss on the defensive line this past year. He went to Detroit, probably had one of his best seasons in Detroit. But other than that, all those guys, I mean, like, are the Bengals missing Eli Apple? Are the Bengals missing Larry Ogunjobi? Like, no, not really. The reason that Lou Anarumo didn't work in Cincinnati over these past few years is his lack of development. He wasn't able to bring in these top draft picks that we were using, first-round picks on Myles Murphy and Dax Hill, a safety and an edge rusher, and he wasn't able to develop them into National Football League players. When he had good guys on the field, when he had proper horses, when he had a good roster, the defense was pretty good. The problem is in a league where roster construction varies so much and you're using all of your funds towards your offense, you got to develop defensive guys on the back end. This is what the Chiefs do. This is what the Bills are doing this past year. They've had a bunch of the Bills had half their defense walk, and they were able to develop guys to pretty good players. Lou Anarumo wasn't able to do that. I think Lou Anarumo works when he's got horses, and first time being on the show, I think the Colts have a pretty good roster. I think the Colts aren't far away from being pretty good. So I think Lou Anarumo will work in Indianapolis. Joined by Reid Mouse of Chatterbox Sports in Cincinnati. The Colts have a good roster. I don't know, man. Every time I look up and down, it's an aging roster. It just continues to get older and older. Like, DeForest Buckner's going to be 30 this next year. Grover Stewart's 31. Let me think. Who else? Zaire Franklin's like 29. So the better players are older, which is always a concern as you get deeper and deeper into your run with your core guys. What positions, though, do you think Lou Anarumo has to have good players at in order to put that, one of the better defenses in the NFL out on the field?
So when this defense was at its height, at the height of its powers, and Lou Anarumo was the defensive coordinator in Cincinnati for 6 years. I think only one of those years did the Bengals have a top half of the league defense. It happened to be the year that we went to the AFC Championship. The year before that, they were right around 15, and they played really well in the second half. But to answer your question, what we saw, like the biggest problem with the Bengals this year, as the biggest problem with every defense around the league, is it starts in the trenches. If you can't get after the quarterback in a quarterback league, what can the safeties do? What can the cornerbacks do? And you're leaving the linebackers out on an island, especially in run game and on pass game, to where if you're not consistently getting a push, if you're not consistently winning those trenches, it's hard to have a pretty good defense. So for Lou, like most defensive coordinators in this league, if you have a good edge rush, if you have a good push in the middle of the line, he's going to be very successful. And I'll also say this. Linebacking play was kind of the hallmark of Lou Anarumo. Like when Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt were thought to be two of the best linebackers in the league, that's once again when this defense was at the height of its powers. So everything starts at the line. If you can't get after the quarterback, if the Colts can't get after C.J. Stroud and Trevor Lawrence and whoever the heck the Titans are going to have, then you can't do anything. But if they can, then Lou Anarumo is going to be very successful.
Joined by Reid Maus of Chatterbox Sports in Cincinnati, talking Lou Anarumo, Colts' new defensive coordinator previously with the Bengals. What would you say Lou Anarumo's style is? Because the guy that the Colts had here previously, in Gus Bradley, there's a guy here in Indy. His name's Rick Venturi. He was the defensive coordinator for the Colts for a long time. He called Gus Bradley's defense, quote, a Friday night defense, just because it's very basic. How would you describe Lou Anarumo's style?
So the Vikings defensive coordinator this year, Brian Flores, got a lot of credit because he was very aggressive, blitzed a lot, and held man-to-man. I think Steve Spagnuolo does a similar defense where he's sending a lot of pressure consistently. That's not Lou's calling card. What Lou does is he's going to send 4 guys more often than not. He's going to drop back into man cover or in zone coverage, and he's going to let his horses do most of the work. He will confuse you. He's not afraid to send back an edge rusher and to guard the flats or to guard a slant or two. Sam Hubbard did that quite consistently for the Bengals. Trey Hendrickson even did it a few times. So I don't want to say it's basic, because there is nuance to his defense that guys like you and I that didn't play in the National Football League or high Division I college football wouldn't quite understand. But it's not over complex. It's not overly aggressive. He's not sending 6 guys consistently and letting his safeties and corners be on islands by themselves. It's group defense. And the one thing I'll say about Lou, his second half adjustments throughout the course of his career here in Cincinnati were otherworldly. I don't know what it is in those 10 minutes that you get in the locker room, because it's not like you can sit in there. It's a college football game where you can sit and talk to your team for a half hour and draw up a bunch of plays. But you look at the AFC Championship game that the Bengals won. They went into halftime down 21-3. They didn't give up a touchdown in the second half. And every time that the Bengals beat the Chiefs, the back-to-back Super Bowl Chiefs, the betting favorite to win this third one, they didn't allow a touchdown in the second half. I don't know what it was. I don't know what changed, if he was consistently evolving his defense, but it constantly was change and confusing to the opposing offensive coordinator, to where we used to say second half Lou, let him cook. And that's exactly what he would do.
Okay. That's great to hear, because I know one of the complaints here with Gus Bradley was the defense that he ran week 1, play 1, was the defense he ran week 18 on the last play of the year. There was never any evolution. There was no shifting the game plan to counter whatever the offense was running. So that is great to hear. I do want to switch gears here, because you are a Cubs fan, which automatically means you're the best guest I've ever had. You're the only Cubs fan I've ever had on here, which is great. And we don't talk a ton of baseball, but with the Hall of Fame inductees happening, I guess that was yesterday.
Yeah.
What'd you think of the guys that are going in?
All 3 were, there's actually 5 guys with the Veterans Committee. with Dick Allen and Dave Parker. But the 3 guys that got voted in absolutely deserved it. I love the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. In fact, if there's one thing that like I feel like I'm an expert at, it is this. And everyone on Twitter, everyone on X.com got so worked up about Ichiro Suzuki not getting 100%, not being a unanimous into the Hall of Fame. And while I get that people are concerned about that, there's only been one player ever that's done that. It is objectively funny that it is a closer, which is like it'd be like if the only unanimous Hall of Fame guy in NFLs was a kicker, like Adam Vinatieri or something like that. And it's just like that's kind of goofy. But like it doesn't matter. You get your plaque in Cooperstown all the same. But Ichiro Suzuki, I've long said that I'm not sure there's ever been a player that was more universally beloved. Like there wasn't a single person in the country that would say a bad thing about Lou Anarumo. Or my bad, I'm mixing everything. That would say a bad thing.
That's exactly what we want to hear here. That's awesome.
Well, not in Cincinnati. That would say a bad thing about Ichiro Suzuki. Billy Wagner. Here's a little fun tidbit about Billy Wagner. Billy Wagner, I believe, was a D3 guy, and obviously was a flame-throwing left-handed pitcher. He's not left-handed. What happened was when he was a kid, he broke his right arm, and his dad said he wasn't allowed playing baseball anymore. And he's like, well, I'm going to learn how to throw left-handed. And he learned how to throw left-handed, and he made a 20-year relief pitching career out of that, and now he's in the Hall of Fame. So that's awesome. And then CC Sabathia, the thing about CC, he might be one of the last pitchers. Justin Verlander is like this, but he might be one of the last pitchers to get in just via counting stats, 250 wins, 3,000 strikeouts. But CC, talk about a guy that was just never had like a 2.1 ERA. I mean, he won a Cy Young. He was always just a 3.3, but he just, every time he went out there, you were getting Hall of Fame caliber starting pitcher. And I think that his run with the Milwaukee Brewers in 2008, now I'm being a dork here, he gets traded to the Milwaukee Brewers at the deadline. And I think he started 17 games. He completed like 14 of them and had a sub-1 ERA. On top of that, he hit like 3 home runs. Is one of the coolest trade deadline moves of all time. So yeah, all 3 guys well deserving. I don't know how you think of it, Jonathan. I'm a big Hall guy. I love baseball, so let as many guys in as we want. Like I'm not picky about it.
I'm not either. Joined by Reid Mouse of Chatterbox Sports in Cincinnati, talking the Hall of Fame guys that just got voted in. I'm in favor of all 3 guys getting in. I heard someone argue against Billy Wagner getting in the other day because the postseason success wasn't there. And I'm just kind of like, yeah, you could argue he's also the best left-handed reliever ever. So yeah. I'm fine with him getting in. I think what you said about Ichiro's spot on. The fact that he had 0 hits in Major League Baseball when he was 26 and he still surpassed 3,000 is one of the most impressive feats I think we'll ever see in baseball. And when you brought up Sabathia, who's probably my favorite of the 3 to get in, and you're like, he's the last guy I was like, oh, he's going to talk about he's the last guy who would take the ball and go throw 9 innings or 7 innings.
Right.
And which is just awesome. I miss that a lot. Mm-hmm. Do you think we'll ever see that again in baseball?
The only way that we'll see it again is if the Major League Baseball is artificially creating that. They've talked about ways to get pitchers to go longer. Let's face this. The reason that pitchers are throwing shorter isn't because they can't throw 9 innings. It's because it's more advantageous. It's more competitive to get more relievers out there. Relief pitchers have had lower ERAs than starting pitchers for the last 70 years. Like since relief pitchers became in vogue, like there's not been many years recorded that relief pitchers are better than starting pitchers in just terms of earned run average. So it is advantageous to get guys constantly moving. We talk about guys the third time they see the order, their ERAs balloon, the OPS of the opposing team balloons. So no, I don't think that it's ever going to be like that. I wish it was. Like I sometimes we've got to do things that are better for the sport because it's more fun to watch than it is competitive. Like the reason that they're not going 9 innings is because it's more competitive, but it's not fun to watch. It's the same way if you're an NBA fan, and I assume that there's a bunch of Pacers fans that listen to this show. We talk about in the NBA that this 3-point shooting has got to go because it's ugly to watch. It's more competitive. It's the reason it's the smarter thing to do. 3 points is more valuable than 2 points, but if you sit down and you watch an NBA game, it's not the same NBA game that you watched 15 years ago, and it's ugly to watch. Like they're just chucking up threes. So the only way that we'll go back to guys going 9 innings consistently is if they artificially create it. And this is the final point I'll make on that. You know who leads Major League Baseball since 2010 in complete games?
Oh, I have no idea.
Hall of Famer Roy Halladay, who hasn't pitched since 2012. So like it's
incredible.
It's gone. It's gone. And it's a shame, but it is. I mean, it's just the way it is.
Yeah, which I hate just with a burning passion but kind of like what you were saying, you played college baseball, correct?
At a very low level, but yes,
Same,
I did.
Same. It's all good. So, do you remember like in fall practice, you would scrimmage and your coach would run out a different pitcher in every single inning, and it was just a pain in the butt because there was never any rhythm. That's what I feel like Major League Baseball is now. Like you're seeing a different guy every time you come up to the plate because, like you said, competitively in terms of trying to win the game, that's what you should do. But I think your point's spot on like you have to make the game more entertaining. And right. I love the idea of even just talking about the Cubs, like John Lester in the 8th inning, trying to battle through and finish a game that's important. It's honestly, it's what makes baseball so great. And I think one of the other things about pitching, and I've had it for a while now, Major League Baseball wants to market hitters, right? Like Mike Trout and Bryce Harper, like those are the real stars of the game. Right. My thing with that has always been, you see Mike Trout 5 times with the bat in his hand at most. Right. Whereas I think they should market starting pitchers because you see them way more. And by having them go 4 innings or 5 innings consistently, you just don't get that. You don't get that same level of exposure, which I think makes it even harder to market them. Do you kind of agree with that? What do you think of that take?
It's hard to market because it's the same reason that you just said. Like, yeah, when the starting pitcher is out there, you see more of them. You're going to see him face 30 batters, but you see him once a week. So it all equals out in the long run. I will say this. How many times have you gone to a major – I don't know if you've ever lived – like, obviously, Indianapolis doesn't have a major league team. But if you live in a city – like I live 30 minutes away from Cincinnati if I'm deciding to go to a game, the first thing I do is who's pitching tonight. Like if I'm like on the fence, I'm like, who we got tonight? It's Hunter Green versus Bobby Miller of the Dodgers. Yeah, I'm in. You sold me. It's Paul Skeens throwing tonight for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Yeah, I'm in. You sold me. So I think that they will always have that power of when there's an elite guy, baseball fans still want to go. But in terms of marketing, it's easier to market the players because not only are you seeing them 5 times a game, you're seeing them 30 times a week. You're seeing them also in the field if they're great, like Ellie De La Cruz here in Cincinnati. Part of his mystique is that he's fun to watch when he's on the base paths. Part of his mystique is he's fun to watch in the field too. So it's easier to market those guys because quite literally they just play more. A good pitcher, you're going to see 200 innings out of in a season. A good hitter, you're going to see 1,000 innings. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's very true. Last question for you, Reid, and I will let you go. The Cubs going to be any good this year?
Yes. It's the Cubs as a fan. You looked at their roster. So 2 years ago, when they folded in September and didn't make the postseason, that lineup was very good. In fact, I think the 2023 Cubs scored more runs than the 2015 and the 2016 Cubs who went to the NLCS in the World Series. We didn't see that offensive production all of last year. And the thing is when you look at the Cubs lineup from last year, pretty much top to bottom was filled with good players. Like Michael Busch, good player. Nico Horner, good player. Dansby Swanson, good player. Christopher Morel in the first half of the year, good player. Ian Happ, good player. They didn't have a superstar. They didn't have a guy, and I heard this complaint from Cincinnati. Like Reds fans wouldn't fear anybody in the lineup. They were all good players, but there's no fear from when, oh man, we got to wrap up this inning because hey, Kyle Tucker's coming up to the plate, and that's what the Cubs went out and got. They said, hey, we're going to go out and we're going to get a superstar. I think that the Cubs are going to rely heavily on their young guys in the back half of the bullpen, which cross your fingers and hope. Like, I think that the bullpen, which was also a major miscue last year because Adbert Alzolay wasn't very good and Hector Neris wasn't very good. Now we're going to be relying on guys like Ben Brown and Porter Hodge, who, if you don't know of them yet, you're going to know of them soon, for good, for better, or for worse. And they'll go out and they'll sign they'll pay some relief pitcher some big money, and they might go out and get another starter. But yes, I think the NL Central is very bad this year, to where 85 wins is going to probably get it done. And I think that's absolutely where the Cubs are going to be. They're the favorites to win this division for a reason.
Okay, fair enough. That's kind of how I felt about it. I'm really excited about Kyle Tucker. I know Dan here in Indy, he's a big Cubs fan. He was like, we got Kyle Tucker. Why didn't we go get Juan Soto? And I'm like, because Juan Soto's really expensive. That's why.
Yeah, it's kind of weighing on Cubs fans, because we think of ourselves as a big brand, because we are a big brand. We're not the Yankees, we're not the Dodgers, we're not the Red Sox, but we're four, right? Those are the three biggest brands in Major League Baseball, and we're the fourth biggest brand. But here's the problem: the Cubs have never signed anyone to a $200 million contract or greater. They're one of like 7 teams that do that. The teams that are with them are like the Pirates or like the Marlins. Like,
Yeah.
it's crazy that this big market is afraid to make huge splashes. We fool ourselves every year into thinking that we're going to get the big market. We fool ourselves into thinking we're going to get Bryce Harper and Juan Soto and Carlos Correa and Vladdy Jr. We fool ourselves into doing that, but that's not who this team is. We are. I think Ken Rosenthal called the Cubs a profitable Midwest bank, and I was like, yeah, that's how they pretty much run it. But yeah, we'll see what happens.
We will. Reid, thanks for your time, man. As always, what is your Twitter? I forgot, and I didn't write it down because I'm not very smart.
You can follow me at ReidMausRadio, and you can follow all the stuff at Chatterbox Sports at CBox Sports. Find us on YouTube, Chatterbox Sports. We do a lot of Cincinnati-based. If you're a Reds fan, Bengals fan, Bearcats fan, we pretty much got it all for you.
Awesome. Thanks, Reid.
Yep. See ya.
That was Reid Maus of Chatterbox Sports. Great guy. Really knows his stuff. Always, it was a blast having him on. We got more stuff on Lou Anarumo coming up at 11 o'clock when Zach Hicks joins the show. When we come back, though, here in about 3 minutes, more thoughts on Indiana losing to Northwestern last night. Pacers play today. Yeah, we got a lot to get to. We'll be right back here in about 3 minutes.
The best takes, stories, and entertainment. It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Indiana losing to Northwestern last night for the 5th time in a row, which means we have to do more all-star tweets. Okay, we did this when they lost to Illinois. I had a blast doing it. And you sit there, you just have the latest tabs pulled up in your search bar, and you're just looking for anything and everything that is related to Indiana. And I mean, oh man, we got some pretty good tweets last night. So we got 4 here really quickly that I'm going to highlight. At 1997, Davis said, Woody is such a moron. Instead of subbing Malik for Ballo and getting Ballo a breather, he insists on playing 2 bigs together. How many times does he have to see it to realize it's not going to work? Look, I hate the 2 bigs thing. It is anti everything I believe about basketball, which I think basketball is about pace and space. Like, you have to spread the floor. The more room you have to operate, usually the better your offense is going to be. With that being said, even when Indiana puts guards on the floor, there is no space because they can't shoot the basketball. So I'm really not opposed to, you know what? Let's go 2 bigs. Let's beat these guys up. Let's get up on the glass, and let's see if we can win games through the inside. On top of it, the 2 best offensive players for Indiana this year are Omar Ballo and Malik Reneau. And I am just not opposed to the idea of putting your 2 best offensive players on the floor at the same time. Next tweet we got for All-Star tweets. Dylan Traeger, or at Dylan_Traeger, says, I really can't understand why Reneau is being subbed back in. Clearly hasn't conditioned and isn't 100% ready to return to basketball. Started off the game shooting 0 of 4, and Woodson publicly said that Reneau hadn't been well conditioned. Hashtag IUBB. Look, when it comes to the minutes with Ballo off the floor, it's either an unconditioned, probably not 100% Malik Reneau, or Big Pasty, that's the official new nickname for Langdon Hatton. I just don't think that's a hard choice. I'm going to take Malik Reneau every single time. Next tweet that we got here for All-Star Tweets, Indiana versus Northwestern edition, at Hoosier Caveman. Both teams are setting back the game of basketball by a decade. Hashtag IUBB, hashtag Northwestern. This was tweeted in the first half when neither team could buy a bucket. A total of 56 points were scored in that first half between Indiana and Northwestern. And then in the second half, Northwestern scored 54 points. So trust me, they got to go in later. There's so many issues with this Indiana basketball team. Last tweet here for All-Star Tweets, Indiana Northwestern edition, at Hoosier Homer says, you can't just lose 5 straight to Northwestern and call yourself a basketball program. This is a fair point. This will not sit well with any Indiana fans because it's Northwestern. Like, you can't allow them to be better than you at the more important things, which Northwestern has been for the entire time that Mike Woodson has been the head coach at Indiana. Over the last 4 years, Northwestern has better guard play and better shooting than Indiana has had, and they've had more success, 5-0 against the Hoosiers during Mike Woodson's time. And look, having guys like Omar Ballo and Malik Reneau and Trace Jackson Davis and Khalil Ware and all those things are great. But you have to have elite guards in order to win. And Northwestern has had that time and time again. Meanwhile, the Indiana Hoosiers have not. Miles Rice has not lived up to the hype that was set around him before this season started. Xavier Johnson transferred in from Pitt and didn't really change anything. Trey Galloway hasn't gotten better. We can keep going. The guard play at Indiana under Mike Woodson hasn't been good enough. And as long as that continues, they're going to continue to lose to teams like Northwestern. Because having bigs are great. Having good big guys on the inside who can go and get you buckets, it's great. But let's look at Purdue 2 years ago. They had the best big man we've seen since Shaquille O'Neal and Zach Edey. But because they had a freshman point guard and a freshman shooting guard, they had issues. They did. And then last year, what did they do? They bring in Lance Jones. Braden Smith is a year older and emerges as one of the best point guards in the country. And they make a run to the national title game. You look at UConn. They've had guys like Stephon Castle, who was the number 4 overall pick in the draft. The year before that, when they won the title, they had Jordan Hawkins, who was a lottery pick. You have to have elite guards to win games. You have to have them. Indiana does not. The Colts, however, did not have a good defensive coordinator in Gus Bradley. That might be changing, though. See, things and teams and organizations, they can change. Maybe. We'll see. Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts, he's going to join me coming up here in about 4.5 minutes. And we're going to talk about Lou Anarumo, Colts' new defensive coordinator.
It's time for the real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
A real staple here on the real Jonathan Smith Show joins Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts. We just have this guy on every single week because the Colts are constantly doing something that is newsworthy. Zach, what's going on, man?
Doing pretty good, man. I mean, look, maybe we'll say we're not going to talk next week, and then they'll make another hire, or they'll fire someone, or they'll somehow. I mean, we could talk all about the Canadian receiver they signed next week. I guess that's what we could talk about next week.
What are the chances the Colts pull a Jags and fire their general manager, and the Colts fire Chris Ballard after everyone else has already fired everybody?
I don't know. That was so crazy how that happened, because there was Liam Cohen pulled out of the head coach race, and then we had Jags beat guys being like, yeah, that was their top guy, and they were going like full court press on him, and then he pulled his name out, and then immediately after they fired Balky. I mean, what a mess, man! What a mess. That, oh gosh, I mean, the AFC South is just a soap opera at this point.
Minus the Texans. The Texans have their stuff together, but that's
true to a degree. But like, they spent so big in the offseason last year just to finish this season exactly where they were last. I know it's not the drama of the other three teams, but like, even them, like, you got to be looking at the season like, man, that kind of stunk, like, yeah. The AFC South's a mess right now.
I don't know. They won a playoff game. That sounds nice.
That's true. That's true. Exact same spot they were last year, and spending all that money. Hopefully they can, I mean, not hopefully, because we're Colts people here, but, we'll see if they can ever get over it. But they got to be disappointed. I mean, I think all four teams are pretty disappointed in their season, I think, from this past year.
I think for Houston, though, they can be like, you know what? Stephon Diggs got hurt, and Tank Dell got hurt. Like there are like legitimate reasons that they can look at and be like, this is why we didn't advance or whatever. Whereas the Colts are like, we're in the same spot because of, we don't know. Maybe it's because of Chris Ballard. Maybe it's because of Shane Steichen. Maybe it's because of Anthony Richardson. It's probably a bit of all three. And, the Jags are, who knows what they're doing. And then the Titans fired, a general manager again. And so, yeah, it's just like you said, it's just a total crapshoot here in the AFC South. But hopefully the Colts are going to be a little bit better next year. Lou Anarumo coming over from Cincinnati to be the Colts' new DC. What were your thoughts on Lou Anarumo? I'm assuming you've studied the tape and done all that.
Yeah, Lou Anarumo, I'm very excited about this hire. And this isn't just me trying to be the optimistic one. I mean, you guys know me from coming on this show. It's not always optimism when I'm coming on here. But yeah, Lou Anarumo, like, I'm excited about this hire. I think for me personally, of the realistic options, he was my second favorite guy out there besides Dennis Allen. And we kind of knew that Dennis Allen was going to be in play for Ben Johnson's defensive coordinator role, Aaron Glenn's defensive coordinator role, or, I mean, even Dan Campbell's defensive coordinator role. So we knew that that he was not really going to be much of an option for the Colts. So then it kind of came down to Lou Anarumo as like my top guy. And I do think there are some reasons to be concerned about this hire to a degree. I think some of them are a little overblown by the Colts fan base, but this is a guy with a pretty proven track record, especially when it comes to big games and in the playoffs. I mean, in the 7 games that he's coached in the playoffs with the Bengals defense, they've allowed 18 points, like an average of 18 points per game, and have forced, I think, like a dozen turnovers in those 7 games. Like, they take the ball away in the playoffs. They make these really good quarterbacks uncomfortable. And they've had a proven track record especially when it comes to the playoffs, but also when he had all of his, all of his young guns back in 2021 and 2022, he had a really good defense. So yeah, I think Lou Anarumo gets a little bit of a bad rep for this last season. I do think some of the criticism is certainly warranted. But I think he's a fantastic defensive coach. Very, very different from Gus Bradley, which I think Colts fans should be a little bit more excited about. This is almost the complete opposite of Gus Bradley in terms of how he operates this system. So I think this will be a really fun change for the Colts. Now, do I think that all of a sudden they're going to be a top 5 defense? Probably not. You need a perfect mixture of talent and chemistry and coaching all to come together at the same time to really be a top 5 defense. But I do think you can see a better Colts defense this next season with Lou Anarumo, as long as they commit to changing up some of their weak points on the roster this offseason.
Joined by Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts. You said there that you're optimistic about the hire. You're excited about it, but you have some concerns. What are those?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at what plagued the Bengals last season was that they were a fairly young defense, that the secondary play was just not up to snuff. Like it simply wasn't there at times last year, especially for a guy who likes to run a little bit more man coverage than what the Colts ran last season. You kind of need the dogs in the secondary to operate in that man cover system, especially at free safety, especially at outside corner. And then also they missed a lot of tackles last year. And it kind of comes to that Gus Bradley thing that we had here in Indy last season, where yes, you can point to the defensive coordinator and say like, your unit's not tackling well. This ultimately falls on you, but it does fall on the talent that you have on the roster. So we saw kind of the low point of his defense last year when these guys were struggling to finish tackles and make tackles. When we saw the lack of talent in the secondary kind of hurt them a little bit. And I think a logical fear is, hey, those are the same issues the Colts had last year. Their secondary was not great, especially on paper. It's not great. Maybe a little bit better in actuality, but still not great. And they missed a ton of tackles. So if these defenders perform like they performed last year, you could bring in the greatest defensive coach in the history of football, and it's not going to change anything. So, I think that the reason for pessimism kind of does rely on the talent a little bit on the team and what they do with the talent on defense to fit his system this offseason. But again, on paper, I think this is a largely optimistic hire. I like a lot of things he's going to bring. It's just, it can't all be, hey, just because Lou Anarumo is here, we can run back the same guys and they're all going to be perfect. Like, if these guys perform like they did last year, it doesn't matter if you have a new scheme. These guys are still not going to be good enough. So, there needs to be a step up in play from a lot of guys, and they need to bring in some more talent on defense just to really make this whole thing work.
Joined by Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts, talking Lou Anarumo, Colts' new defensive coordinator, who had his opening press conference today. Are there any specific Colts players that when you look at Anarumo's system, you're like, this guy fits really well?
Yeah, I actually did an episode on this the other day with Locked On Colts, and the one player that particularly steps up is Kenny Moore. Kenny Moore is just tailor-made for this system, and it's funny. I saw a guy on Reddit the other day saying like, yeah, it's so obvious to say Kenny Moore is a fit for the system because Kenny Moore is great. He's a fit in every system, and that's fair. So let me go into a little bit more detail here. Kenny Moore is a very good slot corner, but he's even better as just a playmaking weapon on your defense. Like, he's kind of a positionless type player, not in the sense of like a Derwin James or a Kyle Hamilton, but in the sense of like even like a Minkah Fitzpatrick in his early days, like that type of guy who, yeah, you can just stick him at slot and have him matching vertical routes and playing some man coverage and stuff. And he'll be a good player for you. When you maximize him like a weapon on defense, that's where you get the best version of Kenny Moore. So when you're blitzing him more, when you're showing single high pre-snap and then you bail him out as the free safety and stuff over the top, he's got great range back there on those couple snaps he gets. When you drop him into a spot zone where he can read the quarterback's eyes behind a fire blitz, he has the ability to bait and make these great plays on quarterbacks and force them into mistakes. He can be a weapon in the run game, like when you run blitz him or you bring him hard off the edge and you let him be one of those like run fitters on defense. That is where Kenny Moore really shines, and you let him be the weapon that he's really made to be. And we saw like Matt Eberflus used him a lot more as a weapon rather than just a traditional slot corner, where Gus Bradley, I felt like Kenny was, they kind of put the muzzle on him a little bit at times. I think he also just didn't have his best play under Gus Bradley in general, but they did kind of put the muzzle on him a little bit these last 3 seasons. And I think with Lou Anarumo, you're going to see a guy way more active in the run game, more active in the blitzing game. I mean, Mike Hilton was the slot corner there for Anarumo the last couple of years, and he was top 3 among corners in pass rush reps every single season under Lou Anarumo. So we're going to see Kenny blitzing more. We're going to see him, in a variety of roles when it comes to run defense and pass defense. And I think he's going to thrive in this role. Like, Kenny was hitting 4 interceptions a season, basically, with Matt Eberflus. I think we're going to get back to him hitting like 4 or 5 in a year, along with, a handful of sacks and maybe push to the Pro Bowl again, like he did in his final season with Matt Eberflus. I think Kenny Moore is really going to shine in this system, and he's going to be one of the premier players in this defense.
Which is good, right? We talk a lot about offenses and like building a system around the quarterback and your best player. We don't do that as often with defenses, but
right.
In theory, like you would want a system that complements your better players. And for the Colts, that's definitely guys like Kenny Moore and DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart. I thought was awesome last year. So it's really good to hear that this is a system that Kenny Moore could be really good in. What is the inverse of this? Like, who on this Colts defense might struggle a bit more with the way that Anarumo wants to play?
Yeah, I mean, I think the cornerback room, like the outside cornerback room, is a little bit concerning just in a sense where they run a lot more man coverage and press man coverage in this system. And while the Colts' two outside corners, Sam Womack and Jalen Jones, performed fairly well in their limited man coverage snaps last year, I think Pro Football Focus had Jalen Jones as like the 7th highest rated man coverage corner last year. But the thing is, among like 80 qualifying starting corners, they were both in like the bottom 10 in man coverage reps. So they just didn't do it at all last year. They didn't do it the year before. I mean, you have to go back to their college film really to have these guys actually playing some man coverage. So I do think there is some concern, especially when Anarumo, just from my count, like on third downs, just from the couple games I've watched, when it comes to third down, he likes to go into press man coverage. He likes to go into man coverage stuff. He likes to do, cover one robber and stuff like that. And I do think there can be some concern there, these outside corners. Jalen Jones, a good physical underneath corner, but does he have the long speed to run with number one wide receivers down the field if he's left on an island? I'm not too sure he does. Sam Womack, I think, showed some really good things last year, but kind of tiny for an outside corner. And honestly, I forgot how small he was because he played pretty big last year, but kind of a smaller outside corner. And usually the only guys who are that small on the outside are like super athletes, like the Jair Alexander types. And he's not really that great of an athlete. He's a good athlete, but not that great of an athlete. We saw him get beat vertically a couple times last year. So are these two outside corners good enough in man coverage to work in this system? Or do the Colts need to go out there and get more experienced man covered corners? I think that'll be a big thing that the Colts look into this offseason. I'd be shocked if they don't grab someone with more experience in man, because it's not that Lou Anarumo plays man at like a 50% rate, but off of my general tracking and eyeball test, I would guess Anarumo is probably closer to like a 30% man rate, where Gus was between like 18 to 20%. So you definitely need corners who are more adept at playing man coverage in this system.
Joined by Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts, talking about Lou Anarumo and all the things that he's going to bring to Indianapolis next year. So I think the best player, that's probably not true. The best player that Lou Anarumo had when he was in Cincinnati is Trey Hendrickson. I don't think you can argue that. He's been one of the best edge rushers in the NFL for the past few years now. But Jesse Bates on the back end was awesome and played a huge role. Do you think the Colts potentially take Malachi Starks out of Georgia at 14 to give Lou Anarumo an awesome safety?
I think it needs to be on the table for sure. I don't think they should pigeonhole themselves into, going into the draft saying we need to take Starks, we need to take Starks, we need to take him, and then he goes at 13 and then you're left scrambling at that point. But I certainly think it needs to be on the table. I honestly, I hope they don't wait until the draft to bring in someone capable of playing free safety. Like, I hope it's not like a re-sign Julian Blackmon and then we hope for Starks at 14 and then the Stark's not there. It's like, well, I guess Blackmon will be it. It's like, no, that's not going to work this offseason. They need to really throw resources at free safety this offseason because, look, free safety is important in Gus Bradley's system, but Gus had to shift to more too high stuff last year to counteract the fact that he didn't have a good free safety. With Lou Anarumo, like, he can do the same thing. Like, he has a history with Tampa 2 and quarters. Like, he does like those coverages. But again, with the amount of like cover one man that he'll run, and he likes his cover 3 as well, he needs a rangy free safety. We saw his defense fall off quite a bit, especially in the past game when he lost Jesse Bates. And it's not like they replaced him with bad players. Like, Geno Stone is a fine football player. And some other guys they had out there, like Jordan Battle, I know he played more strong safety, but when he was back there, like, they had some decent players back there as well. But when they lost that impact, that sideline to sideline impact that Jesse Bates had, it had an impact on their overall pass defense. So, yeah, I mean, even if it's not Starks, like if Javon Holland hits free agency, make a hard push for him, or even if it's like not a high end signing like that, like if it's more of just a mid level, like a Justin Reed from Kansas City, like he's not as sideline to sideline, but at least he's a playmaker back there who knows what he's doing and can kind of work in the system. Just get a veteran that you feel comfortable playing on Sundays, and then if a Starks is there at 14, you can double dip. Like it's perfectly fine to double dip, and then let them compete in camp. You know, whoever ends up being the starter ends up being the starter. But I do think this is certainly a position, especially with this type of defense, where you'd rather put too many resources into free safety than too little resources. Because I'm telling you, man, going into this next season with a Julian Blackmon level of player at free safety, this is going to lead to a bottom 10 pass defense in the NFL. So they really can't make that mistake again.
Joined by Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts. So as you've said, Colts need a new corner. They need a free safety. Is there any other position in free agency that the Colts really need to look at?
Yeah, I think a coverage linebacker would help, or just another veteran linebacker in the room. I'm pretty bullish on Jalen Carlies, but again, I hate having to rely on a second-year former fifth-round pick to be like your every down starter when he just hasn't done it before. Because you guys know me, I'm not really big on re-signing EJ Speed at this point. I don't think he'd be a good fit in this system. Zaire Franklin, I think, will be a fine fit in this system, and I think he'll be pretty good next season. But yeah, Jalen Carlies, I'm fine with him like being the starter if it happens to be that way. But just bring in another veteran type player, even if it's a guy from Cincinnati like Akeem Davis-Gaither is hitting free agency, a special teams captain in the past who's played some linebacker for the Bengals on defense, played a good bit of snaps last year actually because Logan Wilson got hurt. So even if it's someone like that, just bring in another veteran who can cover a little bit, who can run a little bit, just to add more talent to that room. But yeah, aside from that, I mean, you're really relying on some internal development from guys, which hasn't really happened the last couple of years with the Colts. But a lot of what this defense will do next year will come down to the play of Laiatu Latu, of Kwity Paye, of Jalen Jones taking a step, Juju Brent staying healthy, like a lot of this, Nick Cross taking another step. Gosh, if Nick Cross takes another step, that'd be awesome. A lot of it comes down to that, but I still think they can add some more veterans, especially at outside corner, free safety, and coverage linebacker to make this team better. But ultimately, these guys do need to step up alongside those veteran additions.
So I want to move off of the defense and Anarumo. I'm very intrigued to see what it looks like. I'm just excited that it's going to be less vanilla. They're going to game plan, and it's going to be great. I am excited for what he's going to bring. Now, there's something else that Colts fans are very excited about, and I want to get excited about this, Zach, but I just can't. How big of a deal is it that Chris Hess is working with Richardson this offseason?
I feel like Chris Hess has worked with him before, hasn't he? I think he's worked with him a couple times in the past. I don't think they worked together last offseason, but I think the draft year they worked together a little bit. There were a couple articles in 2023 where they worked together. So I don't think this is some big, crazy revelation where it's like Chris Hess is going to fix him, in one off season. It kind of feels like the married couple going downhill or whatever goes to marriage counseling and everyone's like, oh, cool, it's going to be perfect. I don't think that's like a perfect solution, but any work that he does this off season, as long as it pays off for him, that's good. But yeah, I mean, I'm not going to plead to authority here and be like, just because Chris Hess is working with him, he's going to be fixed. There are a lot of issues he needs to iron out this offseason. And hopefully, a healthy offseason with a couple different trainers and a guy like Chris Hess could work. But we got to see the results. We got to see what he looks like coming into camp because last season just wasn't good enough. So, I mean, I hope this drastically changes for him. There are a lot of really cool techniques out there, especially some stuff that Hess does. I know Hess, if I remember correctly from a couple years ago, I haven't looked into Hess recently, but I think Hess was a big guy in doing a lot of those the infrared charting and stuff like that on like how the mechanics look. It's kind of like if you ever see those like ghost shows or whatever, like the infrared cameras or whatever to track like the ghosts and stuff. It's kind of like that to see how the mechanics are working, and then they can tweak them like in between reps and stuff like that. It's a really cool technique, if I remember that correctly, if that's him. And there's even other cooler techniques that I don't even think it's a Hess thing, but like there's like VR training and stuff. I know Jane Daniels does a lot of VR training and stuff. So there are a lot of cool ways to really attack these mechanical issues. So, I mean, hopefully Hess is bringing a lot of what worked with Josh Allen, but if what you're implying is like people are thinking this all of a sudden fix him, like, you know, there's a lot more than just Chris Hess like talking to you and working with you to ironing out some of these issues.
That's kind of my thing. You know, all these stories have come out about Richardson and just the lack of knowing how to be a quarterback, you know, like the whole, like you've heard the phrase, if you're on time, you're late. Like,
right.
There has never been that is the most true statement about playing quarterback. Like, you have to be there early and all those things. And I've just kind of got this concern of, like, how much has Anthony Richardson learned from those things? Is that a concern of yours?
Yeah, I'm not going to go into too much detail in terms of stuff I've heard, just because I'm not a beat guy. I'm not a source guy. And also a lot of it's second, third hand stuff. So it's just not worth me putting out into the universe with him. But a lot of it seems like just a young, immature kid who just didn't get it in a lot of ways last year on and off the field. And that is concerning. I don't think that it's career ending by any means. I mean, gosh, I know you're going to hear this phrase from a lot of people, but if I was judged by the decisions I made at, 21, 22 years old, in terms of like my work ethic and stuff like that, and the decisions I made, away from working, I probably wouldn't be talking to you right now. I do think we get a little too harsh on some things that kids do, but at the end of the day, this is a starting quarterback position in the NFL. There's 32 of these jobs available, and the NFL stands for not for long for a reason. If you don't take this job serious and you're not putting in 120% every single day, you're not going to be the starting quarterback for a long time. It doesn't mean his career is like over, but it is if he doesn't really turn that around off the field in terms of just the commitment to the game and commitment to film study and like you said, not just being on time, but being early and stuff. And I go back to a lot of when Shane Steichen talked about Jalen Hurts in Philly and how, like, even though when he first got to Jalen Hurts, he wasn't this perfect, complete quarterback, but he was a guy where, like, every single day Hurts was hitting him up being like, let's get in the film room. Let's talk about this, like, schematically. Let's like just a pure film junkie, always doing the work on the field, and a guy who consistently got better because he put all that work in. You want that from every quarterback, as much as I'll say, is you really want that from every quarterback. And I do think there is a correlation between guys who don't make it in this league and guys that do. And a lot of that is those guys who put in that extra work. And it's tough too from our perspective, because we don't really get that insight. We're not around these guys every day. So, when we evaluate these draft prospects and stuff like that and say this guy's perfect, this guy sucks and all that, we don't know what the work ethic looks like behind the scenes, especially like the Jalen Hurts thing. Jalen Hurts was a second round pick. Who would have thought that he'd be in the film room every single day and working on his body every day and being now a good starting quarterback, So I think he does need to figure that out. I hope it's with Indy. But it sucks because, again, this is like a 21, 22-year-old. Like, sometimes you just don't understand what you need to do. But that's the risk the Colts took when they took him so high. They started him so early. So, he just needs to figure it out. He really needs to put the time and the commitment in. I'm not trying to imply he hasn't, because, again, I'm not trying to say too much here. But from a lot of the reports and stuff, obviously, here. But that is a big part of playing quarterback. It's a huge aspect of playing this job. Is like, yes, the talent on the field is huge, but you got to be one of those guys who's first in, last out, in the film room 24/7, understanding what's going on, being good with your cadence. Like, these are a lot of important aspects of playing quarterback that people don't talk about because it's all about like the numbers and the stuff we can see. These are the things we don't see behind the scenes, but they're so paramount. to being successful in the NFL.
They are. And one of my, I guess, concerns about this offseason is, as you mentioned, like stories and stuff have come out about let's just call it a lack of focus while he was here in Indianapolis. And that's with him, like seeing Shane Steichen every day and seeing his teammates every day. Now I'm assuming he's going to go back to Florida to do his offseason stuff. Well, all of a sudden, like he's not seeing these people who hold him accountable every single day. And I'm very interested to see if something clicks for him in terms of the work ethic. Last question for you, Zach, and I'll let you go. Are you excited about next season?
You got to give me something to be excited about, I think, is the real thing here. I'm sure I'll talk myself into something to get excited about. But overall, I do think the mood this offseason is a lot worse than what it was last offseason. You know, there was a lot of reason for optimism and hope and excitement going into 2024. And I think a lot of those things that got us excited last offseason aren't as exciting right now. I mean, I'm sure we'll be able to talk ourselves into the new draft class because that's always fun, or new free agent signings that they make, even if they're low-end signings, because we all get excited about that. But the things that really drive excitement are coaches, your head coach, quarterback, maybe flashy new weapons and stuff. And when you look at this team, like the quarterback, I don't think anyone's feeling great about him. Even if you're the most optimistic Anthony Richardson defender, you're still probably not feeling great right now about him. Shane Steichen, who looked like this super smart up-and-coming coach in 2023, didn't have a great 2024. And I think some of the excitement is gone there. And then you're not going to get like many new weapons or anything like A.D. Mitchell. We all had fun talking about him in the offseason, but they're not going to add another wide receiver to this room with the four guys they have. Maybe a tight end. People get excited about if they draft like a Tyler Warren. But yeah, I'm not super excited going to next offseason, especially compared to last offseason where there felt like a lot of reasons for optimism and hope. And I mean, you could kind of tell with the way that Chris Ballard handled his postseason press conference, like there isn't a lot of reason for optimism and hope. They really got to prove it to us. So it's kind of like just biding our time until the season starts, then give me a reason then. But yeah, as of right now, I'm not super excited about it. I mean, it kind of is what it is. I mean, I'm excited to cover Lou Anarumo this offseason. That's a fun defense to talk about. So that's something I'm excited about on my end. But in terms of the team next year, not super pumped right now.
Yeah, it's just like they have to show us something, and that's
Right.
very much the boat that I'm in as well. We're like the state of Missouri. It's the show me state. That's all it is right now. So
yeah,
Zach.
Yeah, I mean, you could say all you want right now, but like you got to show us. You just got to show us at this point.
That's right. It's year 9. Show us something,
yeah.
Please. We're begging you, Zach. Thanks for your time, man. As always, you were great.
Yeah, you have a good one, buddy.
See it. That is Zach Hicks. Check him out on Twitter at ZachHicks2. He's got a podcast, Locked On Colts, where he does an excellent job. When we come back here in about 4 minutes, Pacers in Paris. They play today, 2:00. My thoughts on that game when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
Unadulterated sports talk with unfiltered takes. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully you're having a nice week. Big thanks to Zach Hicks and Reid Mouse. There are two guests today joining the show tomorrow. We got two more. Tony East should be joining at 11 tomorrow, and Zach Gray should hopefully be joining us as well. The Pacers play in Paris. That's today, not tomorrow. Let me fix that. They play today at 2 o'clock on NBA TV. Should be a lot of fun. You should watch this game for two reasons. First and foremost, the Pacers are playing awesome right now. Okay, the fourth best offense in the NBA in the month of January. The third best defense, second best team overall when you look at the net rating, only trailing the best team in the NBA, the Oklahoma City Thunder. So they're rolling right now. If you want to see the absolute best version of the Indiana Pacers, right now is the time to watch. You should also watch, because the game's in Paris, and I'm actually very intrigued to see what a European crowd looks like at an NBA game. I'm kind of expecting it for it to be pretty nuts. I'm expecting for it to be a lot of Spurs fans because obviously Victor Wembanyama is from there. And that's the other reason why you should watch this basketball game, because Victor Wembanyama is amazing. Best prospect since LeBron James, averaging 24 points, which is up 3 points from last year. He's averaging 11 rebounds, which is up slightly from last year. He's averaging 4 blocks, which is up from like 3.5 blocks last year. Shooting 35% from three, which is up 3% from last year. And he's shooting 47% from the floor overall, which is slightly higher than last year. You need to watch this guy play because he's outstanding. He's an absolute beast. He's the most interesting player in the NBA. It's him or Zach Edey. Victor, like the dude's 7'3". He covers half the court. He's athletic. He can pass. He can handle the ball. He can shoot it. He's just insane to watch play. Like, there's a reason why he's called the alien. So Pacers, they're playing today at 2 o'clock, and then they'll play again on Saturday at noon. When we come back here in about 4 minutes, Indiana, not a good basketball team, apparently. They've now lost to Northwestern 5 times in a row, and I know why. And I'm going to tell you why here in about 3 minutes.
Often imitated, never duplicated. The Real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
Indiana lost to Northwestern last night for the 5th time in a row. 5 times in a row they lost to Northwestern, which is incredible. It's incredible. Anyway. Oh, man. They lost last night by 9, 79-70. The defense in the second half just wasn't there. You know, they came out in the first half. I felt decently good about it. They go on this big 18-2 run to close the half. They didn't give up a field goal for almost 10 minutes. Right? Northwestern only scored 25 points. I'm like, hey, we got the good, high-effort, high-energy version of the Hoosiers tonight. And then in the second half, they give up 54 points. 54 points. Just insane. Here's Mike Woodson after the game talking about why their defense was so atrocious.
Well, again, I mean, I think at the timeout, it was 54-52. And then they went on a deep run. We went to the bench and subbed a couple guys. And we just didn't answer the bell coming back out of that timeout. And they did. And I mean, we just didn't – the same things that they ran the second – we didn't guard well the second half, and they made us pay for it, especially from the three-point area. They made three-point shots all over the floor. We never responded. That's kind of problematic. Usually, like, teams play with this thing called pride and, you know, competitiveness, and usually that gets you to respond. But Indiana last night, it didn't happen. You know, like, why they didn't just start running Northwestern off the three-point line is beyond me. Like, force them into Ballo, who's, you know, pretty decent rim protector. And look, when you give up 54 points and a half, you should lose every time. When you allow your opponent to shoot 48% from three, you should lose every time. Northwestern is simply better than Indiana, and they have been for the last 4 years, because they're better than Indiana at everything that is now important in college basketball. For the first time since 1915, it's 110 years ago, Indiana has lost to Northwestern 5 times in a row. Just for reference as to how long ago 1915 was, here are some things that happened or were happening. World War I was going on. The New York Yankees were bought for $460,000. Babe Ruth hit the first home run of his Major League Baseball career in 1915. Ralph DePalma, I don't even know who that is, he won the Indy 500 that year. Okay, like, this is a long time ago. And Mike Woodson is just 5 times in a row. It's incredible. The reason why Indiana has lost 5 times in a row to Northwestern is for 2 major reasons. The biggest one to me is the guard play just hasn't been good enough under Mike Woodson. Okay, it is a cliche. It is said all the time. All the time. Oh, you got to have good guards. Elite guard play, that's what wins in March. That's what wins games. You got to have elite guard play. It's a cliche, but it's true. And when you look at the teams under Mike Woodson, he's had good front court play. They've had talented players in the front court. Trace Jackson Davis, he's playing in the NBA, started for the Warriors last night. He was Indiana's best player the first 2 years of Mike Woodson, right? Helped lead Indiana to a 4 seed in the tournament, which was the highest that they'd been seeded since 2013 when they were a 1 seed. He was an All-American that year, right? You know, in Mike Woodson's first season, the 21-22 season, Trace Jackson Davis helped lead them to their first NCAA tournament appearance in 6 years, right? So he was kind of the first good big man that Mike Woodson had. And then last year, they get Khalil Ware to transfer in from Oregon, right? Who ended up being the 15th overall pick. Malik Renew was a good player last year, averaging, 15 points a game. They brought in Mackenzie Mbako, who was co-freshman of the year in the Big Ten last year. Another forward, another front court player. And then this year, Malik Renew's back. Good player. He had a bad night last night. He hadn't played in 6 games. I thought that was obvious. He looked a little slow. His touch was off around the bucket. He finished 0 of 6 because of that. Omar Ballo was the number 1 ranked player in the transfer portal. Okay, like, he's a good player, leads the Big Ten in rebounding at just over 10 a game. That's 9th in the country, averaging 14.5 points per game, decent passer. Like, he's a good, talented center.
Mackenzie Mbako, been up and down, was up last night, 20 points on 8 of 14 shooting. So the issue has not been the front court under Mike Woodson. The issue has been the guard play. The guards that have come through Indiana under Mike Woodson haven't been good enough. Remember Xavier Johnson, transfer from Pitt? He was the pride and joy of Mike Woodson for the last 3 years. Okay, and he was just another Big Ten guard. He wasn't some elite difference maker. He would come in off the bench, and no one said, oh, no, Xavier Johnson is in the game. What are we going to do? Whereas, last night, every time Ty Berry checked in, it's like, crap. Northwestern's going to hit 3 threes here in the next 2 minutes. And sure enough, that's what seemed to happen every time. To Xavier Johnson's credit, he was a 38% three-point shooter during his time at Indiana. So at least he did something halfway decent. Okay, averaged 4 assists to 2.5 turnovers. That's not very good. He was just another guard in the Big Ten. That's all he was. So he was a decent player at best. And then you got Trey Galloway, been here all 5 years, or for all 4 years of Mike Woodson. It is his 5th year at Indiana. He hasn't gotten any better. He's still a streaky three-point shooter. I know he's at 36% on the year, but it's an inconsistent 36%. It's like one game he hits 3, and then the next 2 games he doesn't make any. Yeah, he's streaky. He's averaged double digits 1 year at Indiana. That's it. He turns the basketball over too much. He's averaging 2.1 turnovers this year. That's the highest mark of his career. He hasn't gotten better. And then you go through the other guards that have been here and played under Mike Woodson. Remember Parker Stewart? He was here 1 year. Then he transferred because he wasn't good enough to play in the Big Ten. And then last year, you had guys like C.J. Gunn. Trey Galloway, already hit on him. Gabe Cupps, not very good. Okay, just not. And then Xavier Johnson, those are not good Big Ten guards. They're average at best. And that's why Indiana missed the tournament. The talent in the front court's there. It's the back court. It's not very good. There's been 1 year where Mike Woodson had a good point guard. 1 year. It was Jalen Hood-Schifino, who wasn't even elite. He was just, a fringe NBA player. That's it. That's all he was. He could, kind of get to the rim, and he made jump shots sometimes, averaged 13.5 points on 42% shooting, shot 33% from 3. The 1 year that Mike Woodson had him, they were a 4 seed. That's the best team that Mike Woodson's had. The team that had an awesome guard. That's it. All his other teams haven't been very good. Even the other time that he made the tournament in the 2021 to 2022 season, they were a 12 seed. They were one of the last 4 teams in. Seriously. Do you know why Purdue has been so good as of late? Because Braden Smith emerged last year as one of the best point guards in the country. His freshman year, he wasn't. And what happened? They lost in the first round to Fairleigh Dickinson, even though they had Zach Edey, the best big man we've seen in college basketball since Shaquille O'Neal. UConn, they've won back-to-back national titles. You know why? Because they had elite guard play the last 2 years. Stephon Castle was the 4th pick in the draft last year. Jordan Hawkins was a lottery pick the year prior. Elite guard play is a requirement to win games against good teams and Northwestern. Okay, the lack of good guard play is why they've lost 5 in a row to Northwestern. A Northwestern guard was the best player in every game Indiana has played against Northwestern the last 5 years. Last year, they lose to Northwestern 76-72. Ryan Langborn had 26 points on 7 of 15 shooting and 4 of 7 from 3. In the 2022-2023 season, IU loses to Northwestern 84-83. Boo Buie, 26 points, 10 of 18 shooting. Later, that same year, 64-62, Indiana loses. Boo Buie, 21 points, 7 of 13 shooting. In the 2021 season, or 2021-2022 season, Indiana loses 59-57. Guess who was the best player in that game? Boo Buie, 18 points, 8 of 18 from the floor. The guards that he has brought in haven't been good enough. We saw it again last night. Northwestern, the 2 best players in that game last night were Barnhizer, guard for Northwestern. He went for 23. And Ty Berry went for 23 off the bench. They both outplayed every Indiana guard. Mike Woodson has not done a good enough job of bringing in guards who can actually impact the game. Okay, and last night wasn't any different. The other thing that he hasn't done a good enough job of is bringing in the shooting that you need to win. Mike Woodson's teams cannot shoot the basketball. Okay, he's made the tournament twice in 3 full years. We'll see whether or not they make it this year. 2021 to 2022 season, Mike Woodson's team shot 33% from three. That was 158th in the country. Pretty average, right? Because there's around 350 teams in college basketball. And they snuck into the tournament as a 12 seed. They were one of the last 4 in. Had to play a game in Dayton. They won and then lost in the first round to St. Mary's, if I remember correctly. And then the next year, that 2022 to 2023 season, the best year Mike Woodson has had during his short time at Indiana, that team shot 37% from three. That was 48th in the country. That's a good three-point shooting team. Say what you want about Miller Kopp and the weird dance videos and the TikToks, which I don't think anyone is a fan of. But that dude shot the ball well. 44% from three that year on 4 attempts a game. Look, if Indiana had another shooter like that on this team, they would be a million times better. Because once again, Indiana lacks shooting. Last year, Indiana has this NBA-level center, Khalil Ware, who's playing really well for Miami right now. They only won 19 games. It's because they couldn't shoot the ball. They shot 32% from three. That was 234th in the country. And you know what's crazy? Like, that's bad. If you're 234th in the country in anything, you are bad at that thing. You are. This year, they're at 31% from three. That's 305th in the country. For reference, there are 352 college basketball teams at the Division I level. Only 47 of them shoot the ball worse than Indiana. Okay, and if you compare Indiana's shooting to Northwestern's over the year, every year, except for one, Northwestern has shot the ball better than Indiana. And the one year that they didn't was the year that Indiana went to the tournament as a 4 seed. Okay, in the 21 to 22 season, Northwestern was at 35% from three, Indiana at 33%. In the 2022-2023 season, Northwestern shot 32% from three to Indiana's 37%. Last year, Northwestern shot 39% from three to Indiana's 32%. And then this year, Northwestern's at 32%, Indiana's at 31%, even though that percentage is going to go up after, they just shot 48% from three last night. Okay? Like, those are the issues. Indiana doesn't have elite guards in their program. They've had one, maybe. Actually, no, they've had zero. Jalen Hood-Schifino is not elite. What am I talking about? Okay, they had one fringe NBA guard come through, and that's been it. And that's just, you're not going to win consistently with the lack of good guard play. Okay? So, this year, I would argue these are the worst group of guards that Mike Woodson's had. Miles Rice has not lived up to the expectations that were set before him. I thought he was going to be the next Michael Jordan, the way that people were talking about him. He is definitely not that. Seriously, like, this is the worst group of guards Mike Woodson has had. Like, if Xavier Johnson walked through that door and was a Hoosier tomorrow, the guard room would get better. That's how bad they've been this year. Miles Rice, the savior. He's one-dimensional. He cannot shoot the ball. He finishes around the rim decently. He can handle the ball. He's an okay passer, but he can't shoot the ball. What a surprise. The guy who shot 28% from three last year is now shooting 29% from three this year. That's an issue. Okay, the guard play and the shooting have to be better for Indiana if they want to win games going forward, no matter who the head coach is. No matter who it is, whether it's Dusty May or Chris Beard or Bruce Pearl or any of those guys. Doesn't matter who it is. Like, you have to have someone who can actually shoot the basketball, and you have to have guards who can actually impact the game. Like, you have to have that if you want any sort of chance at winning games consistently in the world of college basketball. Look at Purdue. They've had that these last 3 years, and they've been one of the better programs in the country because of it. Braden Smith has been arguably the best point guard in college basketball the last 2 years, and that's a large part of why Purdue's been so good. Okay, and then you look at UConn. A lot of good guards over there, and that's why they continue to win games. And until that changes, until Indiana finds a way to bring in some guys that can actually make an impact in the backcourt, they will not win games, right? Because having Omar Ballo and all these guys are great. Having a talented big guy is nice. Being able to throw it in and just say, hey, man, take 2 dribbles, take your little hook shot. Hopefully it goes in. It's nice. It's nice to have, but ultimately the best teams in college basketball have guards that are capable of controlling basketball games and doing what needs to be done. And Indiana simply hasn't had that under Mike Woodson. That's going to do it here on the Real Jonathan Smith Show. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to tune in. Got a good show lined up for tomorrow. Tony East, he's set to join tomorrow at 11 o'clock. We're hopefully going to get Zach Ray on as well at 11:40. He'll pass out some bets. It'll be good. Can't wait to have both of those guys on. They both do an excellent, excellent job. Coming up at noon, the Dan Dockett Show. You know, he's got thoughts on everything going on with Indiana basketball. 12:30, Dusty May, head coach of Michigan. He's going to join the show. And then at 1 o'clock, Mike Lewis of Ball State, as he normally does, will join the show at 1 o'clock. Maybe Chris Collins. I am doing everything I can to get him on Dan's show. But, you know, as of right now, it is no dice. But that's okay. We're going to keep plugging away and working hard and bringing the effort and the energy, unlike Indiana basketball. Thanks again for taking the time out of your day to listen. I'll be back on the air tomorrow from 10 to noon. The Dan Dockett Show comes your way here in about 5 minutes.